Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sounds Like a HR Problem. Today, we wanted to talk about something that's a little bit more personal to us, and this is related to mental health and workplace accommodations. So, we thought that this could be relevant as well with a lot of stories lately about like burnout and mental health. And we wanted to talk about it from an HR perspective and how you can accommodate for your employees and what is required by law. So we'll kind of get into all of that today. So, Ashley, good to see you again.
Yep. Hey, Yang, how's it going? You've been working on finding a new school for your son, right?
Yeah. That's what I was going to talk about because I was like debating if I want to like share or not share because man, that's just been on my mind like the whole time. It's because the school's
Has you
super expensive.
distracted a little bit these
Yeah,
days,
because the
but
school's super
rightfully
expensive.
so.
You know, Houston came out with this list of the most expensive private schools in
I've
Houston,
seen it.
right?
I can't remember one of them. That yours has to be one of them, but one of the ones I
Yeah,
saw was like kind of upwards of like 60K a year, some crazy amount.
yeah. So the school that we're looking at is top three.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At least it's a specialized school for to be in
yeah,
that tier. There's ones that
yeah,
are just like private schools. They don't have any, I mean, there's nothing like special other than they're private, right? Like they're
yeah.
in the
Well, you have
top.
like your St. John's and
Right.
Duchesne and
Yeah.
St. Mark's, right? Yeah, mine is because it's yeah catered towards the special needs population, right?
Right.
Um,
So you're getting what you pay for at least. I mean,
yeah, but it's just a lot. So there's a lot to take on. I'm like, oh my gosh.
yeah.
So this would definitely be a like a life transition because we have to drive him to school every day, and then we live in Katy, so we're far. Um, but our hope is that it's going to be good for him.
It's
So
going to
so we'll
give him
see.
those long-term life skills.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Yeah,
anyways,
I'm just
so
curious where y'all were at. So I guess it's just really kind of making the financial decisions at this point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because and then that's one of the things I think about for like a lot of families that have special needs kids. There's a lot of resources available, but it's
People just don't use it and
expensive
it's expensive.
because it's not a lot of it's not covered by insurance or well, there's two folds, right? So number one is obviously the financial side because it's really expensive and not everybody can afford these services, right? And then you have just knowledge because
Mm.
there's a lot of families that don't even know these
How to
services are
navigate
available.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, like they don't even know what's available. They don't even know what options they have.
Yeah.
They just
Well,
and for a lot of families,
we have my son in behavioral therapy, like play
uh,
therapy.
yeah,
And it's all out of pocket for one.
yeah,
And it's been really beneficial, but we were just at the pediatrician a couple days ago and he was asking me a bunch of questions about how Henry's been doing and stuff. And they want to get him evaluated for ADHD.
mm,
Yeah, which is like a really controversial topic, right? Because it's like medicate or don't medicate, and there's so many people that are like so against the medication. But I feel like we've tried a lot of holistic approaches with him, and we're still struggling at school. So my pediatrician's like, look, you don't have you to make that decision now, but get him evaluated so we know. Just
yeah,
have the knowledge, right? So I don't know where, but I think if we do go down that path and end up with the medication, like summer's a good time to test that because they're not
mm,
in a regular school routine where it's going to have as much effect. You can get like hone that in before they go back to school.
yeah.
So we'll
So
see.
that's the hard part because at his age, it's kind of like how much of it is actually ADHD or maybe he's just a boy that's just like hyperactive,
Yeah.
right? Like it's hard to
See, I
gauge.
feel like my husband writes it off as that. And my
Yeah,
pediatrician, after asking like this series of questions, is like, yeah, but he's like, if you don't kind of get a hold of this early,
yeah,
these are the long term consequences, potential consequences, and sometimes they can be long lasting. So I'm like, oh God, like, so even people with kids that aren't neurodivergent, we're struggling over here too. It's
Yeah.
I feel
Well,
like
ADHD is on that
on
category,
that
on the,
spectrum.
yeah,
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 and
yeah.
my son has some sensory things. Like he
Yeah.
likes tight stuff and weighted
Mm,
blankets, and my daughter doesn't like loud stuff. And yeah, like fully, I think my husband is on some sort of end of the spectrum. I mean, he jokes about it, but he has a lot of sensory stuff, and I think it's kind of been like my kids have gotten that too, inherited that or
yeah.
whatever,
But the best thing is, yeah, get them tested and then you'll
evaluated.
know for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. So
so
anyways,
that's, I thought it was related to this topic, but yeah, both of us have been kind of, it's been an interesting week for us in terms of like navigating kid related, mental health. So, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So, kind of on the mental health thing, like, so we're at that age now, where it's like that middle squeeze,
Yeah.
right? So like we have our kids that we got to take care of and, all that, right? And
Aging
then
parents.
and then you have the aging parents, and then so for our age group and just in general, like the working class, it's like there's a lot of like, and nowadays especially, a lot of talk about mental health, and then people are going through burnout because work stress,
Yeah.
and then you have like this war going on, and then the uncertainty of what's going to happen, people are getting laid off, just
Yeah.
there's just a lot going on, right? So we thought that this could be timely just to try to help people in some way, and Ashley and I both experienced, in our journeys to like going off on our own, through various reasons. So I can empathize with people that are going through stuff, right? Because I've
Yeah.
gone through that, and then since then, for me, it's been like a just a big like personal growth journey,
Yeah.
right? Like getting my headspace right, figuring things out with my son, learning about this whole like new community of being a special needs parent and navigating the whole thing, and then at the same time trying to grow a business on your own and all that, right?
I feel like
So,
sometimes I call it imposter syndrome.
oh yeah, all the time.
Where you're like, am I really good at this? Or do I really know what I'm doing? Do I really have what it
Yeah,
takes to like, or
yeah,
when I have successful moments, I'm like, oh, whoa, am I supposed to, if this is a cool thing that happened to me, I don't deserve it or what,
yeah,
it's just, it's weird because you don't have anyone like in corporate, you have a boss that's kind of driving whether you're doing well or not, you know?
yeah,
And then, and when you're on your own, you really have the success of others too. Like in your case, candidates that you're placing, and me, like employees that I'm managing your project, if they're working on projects or whatever. So it's just, it's a different seat to be in, but it
yeah.
comes with its own level of mental health. Like I guess it's not that like, stress to perform and meet KPIs like we had in corporate, but it's that stress to like, how's my business doing? Did I, send out that invoice? Did I respond to that email to that potential client? Oh man, I let that lead go cold or what, I mean, it's just all these
Yeah.
other little bitty pressures that are different, but it's,
Well, so what
oh,
I say is, being a business owner or entrepreneurship, it's more of a personal growth journey than it is a like how to do
professional
things.
one.
Yeah, because like from a professional standpoint, I have those imposter moments too. It's like, do I know what I'm doing, right? But then when I work with some of my like other teammates, like some of my new hires, right, other recruiters, I'm reminded. It's like, oh, I do know my stuff,
I'm good
right?
at this. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
because
all the
I'll
time when I
coach.
sit at client sites, I'm like, oh, I'm actually good at this. This is why
Yeah,
I'm out on my own. Right.
yeah, yeah.
But it's more the like, I'm good at the professional, like the technical side of what I've always done because I've had so many years experience, but am I good at running a business? Am I good at marketing? Am I good? Those are the things that like is the personal growth journey for me.
Yeah, well, because you're learning a new skill set, right? So I've kind of shared this before about how, this is kind of off topic, but when a lot of leaders promote somebody, right, they usually promote the most technical person on the team, right? But that person may not be the best leader. So just because you're the most technical doesn't mean you're the best fit to lead the team. A lot of times it is,
It
but
just depends. Yeah.
but the
Comes
thing
with
is.
proper training and proper motivation.
Exactly.
And
But
things.
the thing is when it comes to technical training, it's all day, every day, because you're doing that,
Yeah.
right? But when it comes to leadership training, it's very minimal. Like maybe you'll go, if a long one is like a week-long leadership class, which
Yeah.
companies rarely do. Typically, it's like a
They're
2 day,
expensive.
3 day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a 2 or 3 day leadership, whatever. And you just sit there and you're kind of like half paying attention, half falling asleep sometimes, right?
Half
But
checking
then,
emails in corporate, you're like, oh God, I'm getting
well, because you still got work to do,
are they
right?
hiring me in this leadership meeting? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But then after that, that's kind of it. Like maybe you'll
yeah.
have, if the company's good, maybe you'll have like spot trainings, maybe once a quarter, right? But a lot of companies typically don't do that either, right? So
Yeah. Free
then
sink or
you promote
swim.
somebody. So then you promote somebody and you kind of throw them into this leadership role, and then you don't really give them too much. So, anyways, so what I'm saying is, sometimes you'll see the most technical person get promoted, and then they'll be a terrible boss, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a different skill set. So then
Absolutely.
applying that to us, we're technically great at what we do,
Right.
right? But then being a business owner, it's like a new skill set,
Yeah,
right? So then it's
absolutely.
just us learning how to do that, right?
I was gonna say, but that technical person you're talking about, that's where the burnout comes in.
Yeah,
Because if they could have just been like status quo, going through the motions, just, I love what I do, love my company, whatever. And then you promote them, and all of a sudden there's this new set of responsibilities and learning curve and all these things. And for some people, the pressure becomes too much.
exactly.
And I mean, I've seen people where they step down, they
Yep.
promote. And I mean, that's kind of like my example of when my mental health, like I went to work for a company, and I talked about this too in when we talked about our, like, how we got here story, episode 1 or whatever it was. But I was working for a company that was like, I was a road warrior, I was traveling, like doing mergers and acquisitions, and I had a 15-month-old son. I luckily only had one child at the time, and he wasn't in extracurriculars and all this stuff like he is now. But either way, it's still, as a new mom trying to navigate all that, plus being on the road. And the company, I will say, I feel like they did value me because they tried to get me to like stay on or to promote into a newer role, like to manage the team. But I said, the only way that I'll do it is if I can reduce my travel, like, because that's the part of it that's really taxing, and they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So ultimately
Yeah.
I left.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it happens to a lot of people. And I think you and I were in situations where we were lucky enough to like have the option to do that. And there's a lot of people that aren't.
Hmm.
But I also think it just goes, being on the topic that we're on, some people have unrecognized like mental health concerns that they're not, like, they're either self not recognized, but or they're not asking for what they need. Right.
So this happened to me um, before I left, right? So one day my wife is like, dude, you're depressed. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm fine, right?
Yeah.
She's like, no, you're like depressed and you don't know it, right?
Yeah.
And for a lot of men, typically it's like when you have a lot of stress and pressure, whatever, like the solution is just man up and push through, right? That's always the thing, right? So that's just what I was doing because that's just what I've been taught. That's what I know how to do. That's how I've survived my whole life. You just push through it, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, asking for help is also not something that
oh
men
yeah,
are also very
yeah,
good at.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. We don't ask for help. Yeah,
Yeah.
ask for directions. No way. I'll figure it out. Right? Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So we had one of those moments, and then I was like, "Oh, am I?" And then I just
Yeah.
don't know it because I've never gone through it or whatever, right? But then I went. All this stuff happened at work, and I was like, you know what? Like, let me just go talk to a doctor because I was fed up with everything.
Yeah.
And then, I went to the doctor, and then they do fill out this questionnaire, right? And then I ended up checking off every single box except for like suicidal, right?
Wow.
That was a word.
Have you had thoughts of injuring yourself? You're like, no, I'm not that far gone. Yeah.
Yeah, but like everything else, like mood swings, tired, like low, like cognitive ability. I forgot
Right.
what it all was, but it was like
Yeah.
yes, 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 and then just kind of the self harm, like no, I'm not there yet, right? Or
Yeah.
hopefully I won't be there, right?
No.
But But everything else I checked yes, right? And then once you learn more about it, like burnout is on the depression, spectrum, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a form of depression, and it's the rates of it, it's like really high in America, you
Yeah.
know? So anyway, so after that, I took
Did you
time
take
off.
FMLA or anything? Did you ask your employer for
Yeah, yeah,
that?
yes. So the company at the time, and then the reason why I even entertained this option is because I found out, because I was so fed up, I was literally just gonna quit, right?
Yeah.
Because I was just so done. And then one of the girls told me about the company had a really good leave policy, right? So then I was like, oh, okay, let's check it out. And
Explore
then
that.
so then I had, I think it was like 2 months of fully paid leave, which is like
Wow.
really rare. Yeah.
That is rare. That normally it's not paid.
Yeah. Yeah. So I took advantage of
Unless
it
you're in
because,
California, and that's a whole different story.
yeah. Yeah.
But
So anyway, so then I took time off, and then it took me about like 1 to 2 weeks just to even like detox,
right.
right? Because I was still kind of in work mode. But then after about a month, I realized like there's no way I could go back. I
Yeah.
felt so much better, right? I just
Wow.
felt clear, so much, my mood was better, just like everything was just
You're more
better.
present at home, I'm sure, and all those things.
Yeah, 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 just whole life. And then ever since then, I've just never looked back. I was like, I can't go back to that environment.
Right. So for small employers, FMLA doesn't always apply, right? But and it's
Why?
not
Why do you
always
say that?
paid, and it isn't
Yeah,
always paid.
give us
Uh,
some context.
yeah. So usually FMLA. So I'll back up and just talk about ADA for a second too, like accommodate, like a disability. What is considered a disability, right? Because I think when we think of disabilities, we think of somebody like if something you can see, right? A physical disability, like somebody is wearing a boot to work and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened to your foot? How'd you break it or whatever, right? But there are also disabilities that are unseen, that are not on the surface, that no one knows about. Mental health is one of them. There are other physical conditions. People might be struggling with autoimmune disorders or something. So that's disability. And they have really broadened the scope now of what is falls under disability. And what I tell employers is it's basically everything. And I don't sound that to be like doom and gloom, like, oh my gosh, I have to like everything's I have to cover them on everything, but you have to at least explore it as the employer. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but ADA applies once you have like 15 or more. So you can be really small and still have to like be going through that process to look at accommodations, right?
Yeah.
Plus, it's like just be a good person and have compassion, right? Like if someone comes to you, and also there doesn't have to be trigger words. Like they don't have to use the words like, I need to take FMLA or I need an accommodation. They could just simply be having a conversation with their manager about something going on with them, and that can trigger. So I always tell managers, if you're unsure, just come get HR involved, right? Like, and also don't start asking them a bunch of questions because as the manager, you don't want to know all the details. You want to be a little bit removed from it, so to speak, because you don't want that to impact how you view their performance or like set that bias where HR, you let HR take over knowing all the details, and then HR will help you as the manager navigate like what that looks like for their, employment under you, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there are things that will trigger that. So I do lots of trainings where we talk about what does that look like? How do I know if someone needs help?
So in the special needs community, so we call it like the invisible disability. So
Mhm.
like autism,
Yeah,
ADHD, depression,
yeah.
and then there's a whole lot of those,
Now
right?
we're
Like, but
using the term neurodivergent, which I like that term because it's so encompassing, right? Like,
yeah, yeah. So, but that's like a really hard one to accommodate unless they disclose it,
right.
right? Obviously,
People
if they
don't
just,
even know they are unless they go get diagnosed, right?
oh yeah, yeah. So I actually have a story. So I was, so there's this nonprofit that I work a lot with. It's called Culture City, and the story is like the founders, their son's autistic, and then they got kicked out of this museum because their son was stemming, right? And then the
Yeah.
security guard's like, "Hey, your son's being on poor
Behavior
behavior."
or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's making a scene and blah blah blah. You guys need to leave, right? And then I could relate to it because we've gotten kicked out of places too. Because like, so anyways, I was like, I totally, and if you talk to a lot of special needs families, they probably face similar stories. Like,
It might look like a tantrum, but it's just them trying to regulate.
sometimes it's a meltdown, right?
Yeah.
Dude, I've done the walk of shame like so many times. Like there was this one time where I had literally ordered food, right? We sat at a restaurant, I ordered food, and then my son has a meltdown, like full blown meltdown in the restaurant. So then I ended up having to tell them to get it to go,
Yeah.
and then just had my wife and the kids are in there waiting in the car. I just grabbed to go, and then we just went home. Like we couldn't even eat at the restaurant, So that's like one example. But then we've gotten kicked out of movie theaters. We're getting, you know what I mean? So it's just like a whole
Yeah.
thing, right? So anyway, so they started Culture City, just really just to like educate people about invisible disabilities, and then also to provide. Their thing is like they provide like safe places, like a sensory room inside facilities.
Yeah.
So they've gotten really big. Like they have celebrities and on their
Do
board and
they
all that
have
stuff.
something at Dyken Park?
I know they have one at the Toyota Center. They have one at NRG, like designated rooms.
Yes.
And then at Daikin, they don't. They last I heard, they
Well, they
didn't
do
have one.
now, apparently, because when we were at the game a couple weeks ago, like they did a whole little like segment during commercial break or whatever, and they had one of the players' daughters is autistic, and she was in the sensory room, and she was like showing the person around and talking about the room.
Oh, there's like a
Yeah.
new room that they built.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to the founders, and then he was like, yeah, the Astros has the last. That's the only one.
But I
Because at
wonder
that
if
time
they
it
had
was
any involvement in that. That's
well back then it was like Minute Maid, right? And they're like, yeah, that's
maybe
the only
the
one.
ownership change like facilitated that or something, but
Yeah, maybe with this player too,
yeah.
right? But that's great. So that's what they do. Anyways, so I was talking to one of their team members, right, about something else, and she's one of those like late diagnosed individual. Like I forgot what the term is. I'm butchering it, but she was like in
Didn't
her
know as a
like
child she didn't discover.
yeah, like as an adult, like in her 20s, and then she got diagnosed, and she's like, oh my God, it explains so much.
Yeah,
So
about
then
who I
that's when
am.
yeah, but the thing is like she worked at a tattoo parlor, right?
Yeah.
And it's like really loud and there's lights and all this stuff, right? So she put on headphones, right?
Yeah.
Just to kind of dim but it didn't affect her performance at all. She still was, great. And she even talked to the owners about, hey, like I just need this, whatever, right? But she talked about how the way that they treated her before and then after once she got diagnosed changed, right? Like
Yeah.
then they talk a little like as if like she's like a kid, and they talk slower, they talk, yeah, right, like they just kind of treat her a little bit different.
Yeah, that's like
And then
people with hearing disabilities, and then people just start like yelling at them. You're like, no, that's not.
yeah,
You know?
so she's like, dude, I'm the exact same person that I was last week,
I'm
right?
just
Like
asking for an accommodation. Like,
yeah, you can treat me exactly the same, but then in their minds something switched, right?
and
So it's that.
I think employers, this is the part of it that's scary, right? For employers to navigate, is that there are some people who are start underperforming and they'll seek out a disability to save themselves, right?
Oh
There are
yeah,
people who work the system, and
yeah,
that is
yeah,
always, but I think that as an employer, just don't make that your default, right? Like,
yeah,
don't automatically assume that when somebody comes to you and they're asking for an accommodation or they're telling you that they've been seeking some kind of medical guidance and this is the situation, that they're automatically trying, even if they are an underperformer, right, that they're automatically trying to work the system. I think the default has to be, how can we help them, because maybe they're underperforming because of that situation, right?
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think the default has to be, how can we help them, right?
yeah,
And then you go through those measures and those processes, and then you get them those accommodations, you get them the help. And then if they don't improve, okay, well, let's talk about it, right? Because they still have to perform their job. And there are
yeah,
still parameters around that. But I think you can't just write it off automatically when somebody is struggling. But that also brings me to like hiring, right? There's things that
yeah.
you can
Well,
do in that regard.
yeah, yeah, yeah. well, so just to kind of close the loop on this story.
Yeah,
So
go
with this
ahead.
girl, she was actually a top performer, right?
Yeah.
And then just because of the pure bias, they treated her a little bit different. And then she quit because she's like, I
I
don't
don't
want to
want to
work
work for
here.
somebody like
And
this.
then they replaced her with like three people or something.
Yeah,
It's
because they
like something
needed more
crazy.
people to do the job. Yeah.
Yeah, so then they ended up spending more money, and all they had to do was just let her wear headphones. It's like a simple
Right.
thing,
Well,
like,
shame on them, and hopefully she found somewhere that's a better fit for her,
oh yeah, well now she works for Culture City,
Yeah.
which they're all about the accommodation. Yeah, so she
Right.
loves it. Yeah. But yeah, so regarding the hiring, right? So let's talk about like best practices, right? Sometimes people disclose, sometimes they don't with the invisible disabilities. But then visible disabilities, obviously, if somebody comes to an interview in a wheelchair, you just kind of know, right? So then walk us through what is required by law, like, and then what is something that, like a good employer should do.
Right. So as you know, Yang, being a recruiter, like most, at least good job applications. So a hint here to small employers, if you don't have it, most applications should ask a question on there about, are you able to, there's different ways to word it, but thoroughly able to perform the functions of this job, without accommodation or something. And that
Yeah.
can go to things like physical, mental, and like their schedule and stuff. You'll also find where sometimes somebody will disclose in that portion of the application where they're like, well, I just have one issue with the schedule. Can I start at 9 instead of 8 because I have to take my mother-in-law to dialysis or whatever? Like those are things. But then that way you're kind of working with that person. One, you're like, can we accommodate it? Two, we're going to work with them on the front end of this whole hiring process rather than getting blindsided right after they start. Right. That's a much better feeling for everyone to have that worked out. But so what do I do if somebody does disclose some sort of disability on that application? So I think that's where HR needs to get involved, with the help of in conversations with the manager and management, because if it's something easy, you just find an accommodation, right? They need a specific chair. The chair costs $50. Just do it. If they're the best candidate, if they're a great candidate, then just do it, right? Um, but if it's something that's really like outside the scope, it would cost tons of money to make that accommodation, or it's just not feasible, then you really don't have to. So basically, what the laws say is that if it creates undue hardship to the organization, you don't have to make the accommodation, right? So in
So
that,
what does, yeah, so define undue hardship. What does that mean?
so I'll give you an example. I'll give you a story. When I worked in behavioral health, we were in these old, basically houses. They were houses that were turned into office space over in like Montrose. And so we couldn't, there wasn't, one, they were historical buildings. Two, like to do any kind of renovations on them was like a nightmare for permitting and very expensive. Right. So, and of course they didn't meet today's standards, probably under like some of the ADA accessibility stuff, because they didn't have elevators. Right. But so we interviewed a candidate, and she wasn't for our department, but our department, HR, was in the bottom story of this building. And there was another department, I think it was compliance, was in the second story of the building. Right. But because of what HR does, we couldn't have anybody non-HR in our part of the building, right? Because they would hear things that confidential things. So the person was in a wheelchair. So it was very obvious they couldn't get up the stairs to the compliance offices. We also couldn't switch with them because there was like reasons why HR was on the bottom floor of that building. Well, some of it was to accommodate people for other sections of the organization, right? For onboarding, people coming in to onboard. But it would have been very expensive for us to build an elevator. We started with, is there any other role? Could we find some other job for that? Like, rather than just turning them down flat for their disability, because that's not what you want to do. we basically just had to say like it's an undue hardship. And
Yeah.
so we didn't make the hiring decision. And that's
Yeah.
it's still a risky decision and it's still not a good feeling one. But sometimes you do. Sometimes you have to make that call. But if there was like, let's say she had decided to seek some kind of action against us for like unfair hiring practices or something, we just have to have our documentation in order to show that it really is. We went through those steps and we showed the undue hardship, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of a story. When I was working at with agencies, I hadn't. I think some another recruiter had met this candidate or recruited this candidate, and then I was coordinating whatever. And then I didn't know because they didn't put it on the notes, so I didn't know that this person only had one hand, right?
Yeah.
And this was for a data
Age or
entry.
disability, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was for a data entry job.
Okay.
So their job was to like key in stuff, right? But I looked at their scores and their scores are
They
really
could
good.
one-handed do stuff that people two-handed could do. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're super
I've
fast,
seen that
right?
before too. Yeah.
Yeah, so then I presented them because I'm like, oh, their scores are great, the whatever, whatever. But then it wasn't disclosed that they only have so I wasn't able to like warn the client or just
Right.
kind of give the client a heads up that hey, don't be alarmed by this, but they're really good, blah blah blah. And then they showed up to the interview, and then the client calls me. He's like, dude, like what are you doing? And then I had to like explain. I was like, oh well, they can still do the job and do it really
Yeah,
well,
like their
right?
scores are there. Yeah.
Yeah, but some people they just can't get over
Right. Yeah.
their biases. It's
Mhm.
what it is,
Yeah.
you know.
No, for sure. That's the tricky one, right? Is knowing what to do, like knowing when.
Well, so with the bias thing, so that's kind of one of the things, and part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this as well is because, there's all those stats about people with disabilities have higher unemployment rates,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of it has to do with, well, number one, like just companies are not able to accommodate for various reasons, possibly, but then also, I feel like it's more common is that the
Yeah.
biases. They just don't want to hire these people or they don't want to deal with it or they think it's going to be more challenging. But then there's a lot of stats coming out now with some of the bigger companies. So there's one with like JPMorgan where they have like an autism at work program. And they started this like about 10 years ago. And then they found that some of their neurodiverse hires, well, and then obviously it's like a smaller, it's not
It
like a
depends on the
huge
industry. I'm
study.
sure like IT industry,
Yeah. So,
not
so
finance where you're working with numbers
Yeah, so
versus.
this is a small cohort, but it's for these specific roles, and they found that this population was like almost 50% more productive than other tenured employees,
Yeah.
right? And I know Deloitte was had like a whole program around this.
Yeah.
SAP did one, and then they found that retention rates were 90% higher, right, compared to others, right? So there's all these like
If
stats
they
coming out.
hired those, right. If
Yeah,
they hired those folks, the retention rates were. I think that just goes back to, and that's a different topic, right, than we're on right now. But again, it goes back to finding people's strengths,
yeah,
making
exactly.
sure people are in the right role. And some of that even starts before we ever are involved. Like when people are selecting college degrees, like there needs to be more emphasis, more focus at those lower education levels, like in high school, and then where to identify where people's strengths are and how those can be applied in the
Yeah,
courtroom.
well now you're getting to a whole like systemic
I know.
like
That's
that's
right. That's
yeah.
a whole different topic.
Ashley's gonna run for Department of Education chair.
Okay. Oh, a guy in my neighborhood thinks I should run for city council. I don't even want to talk about it. I was like, no, I don't have time for
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But so to come to bring this back to like employers, it's obviously not every company has the resources to develop a program like this or to do these types of initiatives, right? But number one, I would say just be more open-minded to hiring different types of people,
Right.
and then ideally like have some sort of employment or interview kind of structure so that you can put the right people on the right seats on the bus, right?
Right.
And you can get a very diverse group of people that can really improve your revenue or productivity or whatever, right? Because from a hiring perspective, what I see all the time is people like to hire people like them,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's
It's
why
that
that's why
mirror
you
and match. Oh, I feel like you
yeah
have the same energy as I do. So we're gonna like
Then that's just kind of so then you'll have a whole team of like females that are
that's
blonde,
not,
you know?
but that doesn't always work. Cause I feel like
Yeah,
I had made that exact mistake where I hired somebody who like was like me. And then it was like, no, God, there's two of us. Like, it
yeah.
was like too much energy and not enough work was getting. It was like, okay, no, we gotta. Sometimes it's better to like have diversity in your team
Yeah.
because
So
then people are bringing different ideas to the table, and
yeah. Well, so what I try to coach a lot of my clients sometimes is like, hey, like just know that you have bias. Everybody has bias,
Mhm.
right? And then knowing that when you're screening, make sure you're not screening for your bias, right?
Right.
And yeah, make sure you're not ruling people out because of, different assumptions that you have about.
I mean, we did it as recruiters. I'm not gonna lie. Like I would roll people out on over silly things, right? Because when I was in staffing, do you remember they had ringback tones on
Oh
phones?
yeah.
Remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I would call a candidate to like try to set up a pre-screen and then have like this ridiculous ring, and I'd be like, no, we're not calling them back.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or the
yeah,
crazy
like, this is not
emails.
professional, like
Yeah.
or email
Like
addresses that were like
yeah,
ridiculous, and you're like, oh my
juicy
gosh.
girl, one, two,
Yeah, and
three.
you're like, I mean, we did it too, right? And we had jokes about it and stuff in the agency,
Yeah,
right? But it was there. It's still,
yeah,
I still probably should have called the person and
yeah,
coached them on, hey, your email address should be changed. Yeah.
yeah.
But I was young and green and I know things now. But I think so moving past the hiring, right? I think it gets more complex when they're there as an employee. Let's say they didn't know it's something that happens. Okay. It is one thing too, if somebody has like some major disability, doesn't disclose it to you, shows up day one and has that disability, it's very clear they were trying to get around it in the interview process. So like they didn't disclose it they were hiding it on their application, right?
Mm,
That's the whole.
yeah,
But let's say it's something that happens while they're employed, like that was not a pre-existing thing, and now all of a sudden you got to make an accommodation, right?
mm,
You just have to go through that interactive process. You have to have those conversations. HR does, manager don't do that. But to explore, what the condition is, ask for that medical documentation, look at what their restrictions are, look at what their providers are saying as the timeline, if there is one. Mental health gets a little bit trickier because if I have a broken leg, my doctor's probably going to say 6 to 8 weeks, right? So I'm like, okay, go work at home for 6 to 8 weeks,
mhm.
no worries. And then once your doctor clears you and your restrictions are lifted, you're back in the office, right? Mental health is a journey. It doesn't always have an end date, right? So it's trickier. I had an employee that came to us and disclosed and because they were having performance issues, right? Again, a lot of times that's an indicator that something is going on. So I think if you're a good manager, you ask the person, and without trying to pull out too much personal detail, but just like, is there anything else going on that's like affecting your performance? And that's where you
Yeah,
may get those answers. And then you're like, okay, this is HR. But I think so. This employee came to us. He was very forthcoming. He said, I'm struggling with an alcohol addiction problem. Luckily, we were an employer that absolutely understood that because we're a behavioral health company, but there are some companies that would just terminated that employee and said, bye.
yeah.
But anyway, we were like, well, let's work through this together. So he took FMLA and he went and sought treatment, inpatient treatment. And so that entire time that he was struggling and working through treatment and all that, he was considered protected under ADA, right? Well, and FMLA, but that was just for the leave part, right? There are things
Mhm,
that can coincide. So again, that's why
mhm.
it's important to talk to HR about how to navigate all that. But once he came back from treatment, he was considered to be in recovery, right? He was considered to be sober, so to speak. So he wasn't protected anymore. So then if his performance declined or something, then we're going to manage it. It's not like he gets a pass now, you know? So yeah, I think it's just, it can get really complex. And there are people that work the system. We had someone one time that, you know, said I need to take a leave. And so we started that process and we went through all the paperwork and documentation from her medical provider and this and that. And we put her out on leave and she applied for short-term disability because she had elected that as one of her benefits options, you know. So she had it. So that supplemented 60% of her pay. So now she's out on, she's at least not unpaid leave. But then as HR, our job is to continually get updates on when the return dates are. So every like clockwork, like every couple of weeks or whatever it was that we would, you know, the doctor's notes would have a date to a date, right? And it would be like this date to this date. So basically on that date, we would have to be like, okay, where are we at? Is she coming back or is she still out? And then she would bring me another doctor's note that looked pretty much exactly the same, but would extend it. But what the doctor's note didn't have on it was like what the restrictions were. Cause I'm like, well, wait, could we just bring her back and like accommodate her? You know, like at least get her back to work. So I called the doctor's office to talk to someone about, you know, hey, I'm getting these notes. That's fine. We know what her condition is. We know what her leave dates are, what y'all keep sending, but I don't have any restrictions. And they're like, well, can you send me over these notes, like the latest one or whatever? A couple hours goes by, I get a call back and they basically are like, these must be fabricated because we haven't seen her since XYZ.
Wow.
All the way back to like that original date.
Yeah.
For like 9-10 weeks or something. She was getting that ended up FMLA. And so not only did we terminate her for that's a serious offense. Like we could have pressed criminal charges. The doctor could have too for forging his signature. Like that's a big deal. But we also had to report her to the insurance company because it was insurance fraud for like the short-term disability component. So
yeah,
there are people that do it, but it's rare. I mean, I've been in HR for 20 years and that's the only time I've ever seen that. So,
yeah.
but again, that just goes back to doing your due diligence as an employer and having the right HR people in your corner to help you navigate all that. Because then, you know, you have options on both ends for accommodating, for figuring out if someone is working the system, all of those parameters, right? So.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. Okay, so for us, we'll say like a small to mid-sized company, right? That wants to accommodate best they can, but at the same time wants to be protected and know kind of what they must or not, accommodate on.
Yeah.
What's what would you say is general kind of guideline or general tips that they should do? What are some common mistakes that you see that they could make?
Yeah.
Give us a little rundown for that.
So the most common mistakes I see are one, just non-notification. A manager hears something or is having a conversation, knows something's kind of going on with an employee that might need to have that conversation, but they don't like bring it, escalate it up to HR or management or whatever. Because there are companies that don't have quote unquote in-house HR, but either way, someone else should be like brought into that conversation. I'm like, hey, I think something might be going on with this employee. So the non-notification is definitely something that we see happen a lot. And then also a lot of times things can happen and the person's back at work and the proper channels weren't even followed. Like, because you do have employees too, bless their heart, these are the great ones, right? But they want to hurry up and get back to work. They have to have that income and they need to support their family, all those things, right? So a manager will just let them come back to work without assessing really assessing their medical condition or their restrictions, or what they are they really allowed to come back? Like, so what if I bring someone back who's really not supposed to be back per their doctor's instructions, and they re-injure themselves? Well, now I got a workers' comp on my hands.
Yeah.
Oh, then I'm in a whole other mess of hot water. So making sure that someone other than the manager, if you don't have HR, is working with that employee to understand their medical condition, their restrictions, when they can return, et cetera. Right. So those are just some best practices. And then I'd say on the accommodation piece, like there's some pretty clear guidelines to me, like on accommodation, right? Like if it's an office person, why can't they work from home during that period of time? Right. And I get that that can get scary, because it's like, well, what if they just send them home forever and they never come back? Or what? And all my other employees are going to be like the optics of that, right? But I can't disclose that I sent them home because they have a disability. So what do I do, right? So I think it's more, you can disclose to your team that somebody's gone to work remote. You just can't give them the details. You can just say, we're working with this employee. This is part of an accommodation we're making. And so it's not like they're getting special treatment, right? So
Yeah.
remote is an easy one. But there are positions that just can't, like my husband, we talk about this a lot because they're warehouse environment and it's very manual, like a lot of what the warehouse people, the jobs, it's literally pulling bolts and putting them in a box. You can't do that from home, right? So in those cases, obviously the accommodations have to be a little bit more nuanced. You can't just be like, oh, work from home. Yay, solved, right?
Yeah.
But there are still things you can do. But I think that's why it's important just to at least seek advice. If you get into, try to do it on your own if you don't have in-house HR. But if you get to a sticky situation, because I've also seen situations where you have multiple things overlapping, FMLA, ADA, workers' comp, and then it gets real tricky.
Yeah.
So you want that expert advice.
And a lot of these accommodations don't have to be expensive either. Yeah, a lot of these accommodations can cost you no money, right? It's
Sometimes
just a
it's an
simple,
office chair, right? Like I've had
yeah,
people come to me and say, like, I have a back issue and I just need a more ergonomic chair. And hey,
yeah,
I did my research. This is the chair I want. And the employer will say, okay, purchase the chair, bring me the receipt, we'll reimburse you. Done. Like it
yeah,
can be easy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or it can just be like, hey, move their desk from here to
Yeah.
there,
Yeah, absolutely.
or for some people, it could just let them wear their headphones,
Right.
right? It's like simple things that don't have to cost a lot of money that
Yeah.
can help you retain a really good employee,
Yeah.
right?
I have a vendor that I work with, and their offices are these really old office buildings or whatever. But a lot of people were, struggling with like the environmental factors, like around how dark it was or the fluorescent lighting. So they actually spent the money, and this wasn't to accommodate one specific person. I think it was just the general overall like happiness of the office. But they put in a bunch of skylights to get like natural lighting into the
Mhm.
offices, and it like made a huge difference in
Yeah.
everybody's like work.
Well, just their mood,
Mhm.
right? So improved mood, happier employees, better productivity,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. It was so cool what they did. Especially just to make those changes without being prompted to, right?
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. All right. Well, Ashley, this was a full episode here. We
yeah,
covered a
it was
lot.
very informative though. I think this is a topic that a lot of employers have to navigate. Um, and they don't always want to, like, it's a tricky one for them to navigate, but they have to at some point or another. And
Yeah.
now they have a little bit better, like, knowledge and the best practices and, you know, understanding about the different parameters and different kinds of disorders. So,
Yeah. Because when you're dealing with people, you have to factor in like the mental health,
oh,
right? You
yeah.
have to make sure your employees are happy, that they're healthy, that they're doing well. Because at the end of the day, it's great for your bottom line.
Yeah.
It's going to improve productivity. It's going to improve retention. All of the measurements that, um, increase revenue and productivity, right? It's all factored into how your employees feel.
There's statistics that prove it. Like,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
just in the neurodivergency realm, like you were talking about earlier, but like in general,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's been case studies done that show like the trend upwards when certain things are done, right? So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So Ashley and I are always advocates for the people. We're always like, hey, like take care of your people,
we're going to
do
protect employers or help employers protect themselves, but I'm also
obviously. Yeah, of
advocating
course.
for employees because we were in those shoes once. Like,
Yeah. Well, when I started WeHire, one of the things was I wanted to do my small part just to make the workplace better, right? Because
right.
with what I do, like I talk to people all the time about why they want to leave their job, right? Because that's the thing. It's like, why do you want to leave this job and then go to this job, right? Like I need to know like why, right? Um, but it's just crazy the stuff that they tell me.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's
some
sad
people
that
have like
there's so many
they have
workplaces that are not.
yeah, like toxic managers that are like screaming at them in front of everybody, right? Like just berating them. It's just like it's just human decency, and like and then you hear about like just mass layoffs and cultural changes, people just getting laid off like with a simple phone call or
Right.
just and I kind of understand why companies do that sometimes, but yeah, it's just
Well,
people
that's why I like working with small employers
yeah,
because they do
yeah.
tend to be like more family oriented and more accommodating for whatever reason. Because their employees are usually like, especially the good ones, they've been there a long time. They're loyal to me. I want to be loyal to them. There's this whole loyalty factor, but also I enjoy working with them like as a consultant because they don't know. Because sometimes they're their own worst enemy. Like they may be making accommodations, but then like wait to time out, but if you make accommodation for that person, then you got to make it for this person. You're setting a precedent. So it's I enjoy educating small business owners on how to navigate these things, but I enjoy working with them because they're usually more open to like suggestion.
Well, it's that whole. Well, then there's that whole stereotype with like some of the other bigger companies, especially if they're backed by PE firms or something like that,
Mhm.
where they're all they care about is numbers, numbers, numbers.
Profitability.
Yeah, and then what gets cut is people's benefits. Like people will get cut.
Yeah.
So the human part gets put to the wayside versus the numbers, right? And when you're running a company with people, it's like you have to think about the people,
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's why Ashley and I are always champions for the people. We're always like, hey, take care of your employees. And if, personally, as I grow my business, like my goal is to obviously you're in business to make money, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I want to lift people up with me. We
Well,
all grow
there's been
together.
times where I've paid my employees before I paid myself.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
like
But that,
because
but that's what, but that's what
cash
builds
flow
long-term
was like
loyalty.
slow that those couple months or something.
Yeah.
I had a vendor that wasn't paying me or something. I'm going to pay my employees first,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
100%. So
yeah. But but those are the things that build loyalty long term,
yeah,
right? People
absolutely.
remember that, right? So,
Yeah.
because I have a few clients where when everybody else was doing mass layoffs in Houston, because of the oil downturn, there was a handful of companies that decided not to, right? And then when things came around, like those are the ones that people remember that,
Yeah.
right? And then number one, they retain their best employees, right? And then because it's much cheaper to just kind of take the loss on the front end than to have to like retrain
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
or buy that experience later at a premium, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. They
yeah.
figure it out
So
somehow. Yeah.
yeah, and then now like the one that the company I'm thinking of, like they're one of the top companies. So they grew exponentially, right?
Right.
Um,
The numbers
but
don't lie. The stats don't lie. That's for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. Uh, Great chatting with you today. And for all the listeners, if you want to submit your stories, the links and everything will be down below. And stay tuned next week for another episode from Ash and I.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good
All
one.
right. Bye.